Jenny's afraid of water. I mean, she swims so well, but still she's afraid of water. So she won't go near the sea. Not me. Katie's afraid of darkness. I mean, she sleeps and all, but still she's afraid of darkness. So when the lights are out, she has to hold my hand. I don't understand. I'm not afraid of anything, be it mountains, water, dragons, dark, or sky. I'm not afraid of anything. Tell me, where's the challenge if you never try? So watch me fly. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of anything. That song is from a brilliant musical called Songs for a New World by the composer Jason Robert Brown. I first learned how to sing it when I was in high school, and I've performed it so many times since then, it feels like it's in my bones. Despite what the character says, you learn during the song that she is afraid. She's terrified of losing her new lover. Yet she keeps declaring her courage. I'm not afraid. Declaring courage in the face of fear. I've needed to do that so many times in my life, including right now. What gives me that courage? Other people. When I try to go it alone, I tend to fall apart. The times when I've felt the strongest are also the times when I felt the most supported by others. And I wouldn't have found that support if I hadn't asked for help. Good morning. My name is Olivia Mozzi. My pronouns are she and her. For an image description, I am a white woman with short, wavy brown hair and glasses. I'm wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt that says "This body is worthy," and I use crutches to walk. I'm completely honored to be with this community to share about the theme of design. I'm not a designer by trade, but as a person born with cerebral palsy, I have more than 30 years of experience living in a world that isn't designed for me. Because of that, I've needed to shape my own environment so that I could get the support that I need. When I was younger, a lot of that was provided for me. I'm lucky that I grew up with parents who advocated for me before I knew what advocacy was. As a child, I had physical therapists who worked with me, sometimes daily, and a team of doctors who performed 8 orthopedic surgeries to help me move through the world more easily. However, there isn't as much knowledge about how to care for adults with disabilities. So as I've gotten older, a lot of that support system has naturally fallen away. If I want help, I need to ask for it. I think American culture has the wrong idea about needing help. When we portray resilience, it tends to be about going it alone or toughing it out. Just last week, I was in a conversation on LinkedIn about whether it was weak or strong to ask for help. It is strong, full stop. We need each other. So how do we change the conversation around asking for help? I want to explore this through 2 questions. First, how can we be more intentional about designing a world that includes all of us? Then, how do we move away from the fear of needing help and move toward the power in asking for help? I invite you to close your eyes. Imagine with me that we're at the first night of summer camp. We've just reunited with some of our best friends from across the state, and we're getting ready for opening campfire. The smell of wood smoke is in the air. We sit wherever we want in the amphitheater, and when the counselors start singing our favorite songs, we all rush to the stage to dance and sing along. Open your eyes. What did your fellow campers look like? Did any of them walk with crutches like me or use a wheelchair? How would that change the scene you imagined? At Camp Riley, this scene has been happening for nearly 70 years. How? Universal design. Camp Riley takes place at Bradford Woods, Indiana University's outdoor center in Martinsville, and one of my favorite places in the world. It's a summer camp designed for youth with physical disabilities and other chronic conditions. Every activity is tailored to campers' individual needs, and thanks to Bradford Woods' commitment to universal design, camp is a very different environment from what most of our campers experience in their hometowns. For example, take the amphitheater that I described. All of the seats are benches that can flip up or fold down, so a camper who uses a wheelchair can sit right next to their friend who uses a walker. You can access every level, including the stage, by steps or a ramp. Universal design is a process that empowers a diverse population. It creates environments to be as usable as possible by as many people as possible. Universal design is not the same as accessibility. You are likely familiar with accessibility thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. The ADA is the reason why we have automatic doors and reserved parking spaces. But universal design goes a step beyond that. A key component is choice. If you go to a movie theater, for example, accessible seating is usually limited to a couple of seats in a particular row. But in a space like the amphitheater at Bradford Woods, everyone is able to use the space in the way that they choose. Our world is not designed for people with disabilities. But here's the catch. When you design in a way that supports the disability community, it benefits everyone. Here are just a few things you may have used lately that wouldn't exist without activism from the disability community. Curb cuts, remote controls, and closed captioning. If you aren't designing with inclusion in mind, you are excluding someone by default. And I know that hurts to hear, but it also hurts to be on the receiving end, to be unable to participate in something not because someone intended to exclude you, but because they didn't think about you being there at all. This creates a vicious cycle. We hear this from businesses in particular. I don't need to have an accessible entrance because I don't have any disabled customers. Well, you don't have any disabled customers because they can't get in the front door. This is especially important to keep in mind as we start to move back to in-person events. Virtual events and telehealth appointments, when done well, can be far more inviting for many in the disability community, even when we're not in the middle of a pandemic when many of us are high risk. We don't need to worry about navigating stairs or leaving in the middle of an event due to a flare-up of symptoms. How can you continue to include us? Also, disability is the only minority that anyone can join at any time. If I was in an accident next week and needed to start using a wheelchair, the accommodations I would need to be successful would look very different. So when I say that designing for disability benefits everyone, I truly mean everyone. Finally, I challenge you to think about inclusion as more than something you have to do because it's required by the government, or that you should do because it might get you brownie points. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you're not paying attention to the disability community, you are missing out. You're missing out. There are disabled movers and shakers in every field: fashion, the performing arts, politics, sports, literature. I'm proud to be among them, and I want far more people to embrace what we have to offer. Universal design is a way to get more people into a space, but true inclusion, where people feel like they belong, involves changing our attitudes as well as our environment. There's an element of spontaneity in authentic inclusion, and that is only possible in relationship with other people. I don't expect that anybody else will anticipate absolutely everything that I need. I don't even anticipate that a lot of the time. But with supportive people by my side and a healthy dose of humor, we can figure out how to make almost any situation work. Asking for help builds community. When I moved back to Indianapolis in 2014, I was going to a lot of weddings. And I often felt self-conscious at these events because I was usually the only one with a visible disability. It felt like everyone was staring at me. Luckily, around that same time, I met my life coach, Lindsay. Lindsay helped me see my disability as a source of power. We talked about the fact that yes, I will naturally turn heads when I walk into a room because of my crutches. However, even if my crutches draw people's attention, I can decide how to keep that attention. That was a significant mindset shift for me. Having a life coach was also my introduction to having my new support system as an adult. I learned that if I was feeling stuck or overwhelmed about adulthood, I didn't need to find the answers on my own. There were people out there who actually wanted me to ask them for help with things like understanding my finances better or updating my resume. Recently, I decided that I wanted to get back in the habit of working out. I'd been hearing about a new gym in town, so I reached out to see if the owners had any experience with adaptive fitness. And now I have the best personal trainers, Jason and Dana, with Day One Fitness. From our very first session together, they've been cheering me on not only in the gym, but in life. And I wouldn't have gotten the chance to build that friendship if I hadn't needed to ask them for one-on-one help to exercise. In asking for help, you have an opportunity to build a really beautiful team of people who know how to show up for you. And that is worth every risk. Having people you can depend on is even more important now when so many of us are facing challenges with our mental health. Last summer, I was really struggling with anxiety. My therapist eventually floated the idea of trying a medication. As much as I wanted relief, it took me a few months to make that doctor's appointment. Even as a fierce disability rights advocate, I needed time to be okay with asking for more help. Now I consider my anti-anxiety medication my pandemic MVP. Mental health disabilities are also covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. If you need support with a mental health disability, the disability community is here for you too. It can be easy to feel isolated as a disabled person, but loneliness is not exclusive to the disability community. 50% of Americans report feeling alone some or all of the time. That's a sobering statistic, and I'm proud that our city is working to change that. I volunteer with Indie Hub as part of our new Meet Indie program. As a city ambassador, I help our neighbors make meaningful connections so that Indie feels more like home. And I'm struck by how many of the conversations I have touch on the impact of loneliness. We're all looking for people who will show up for us when we ask. If that strikes a chord with you, you are not alone. Please keep going. Please keep asking for the support that you need. Now that we've talked about asking for help, I want to offer you some help as well. Here are some rapid-fire best practices to keep in mind as you support the disability community. Educate yourself. What you've heard today is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm confident that you didn't learn about disability history in school because I didn't even learn about it until I started researching it for myself, and I'm disabled. Watch the documentary Crip Camp. Read books by disabled people, not just about them. Diversify your social media feeds. There are so many types of disabilities, and each one of us who's impacted has a unique perspective that's worth listening to. Disability is not a dirty word. I have no more patience for euphemisms like special needs or differently abled. When we think of disability as a word to avoid, it means we're also thinking of disability as itself as something to avoid, and that will certainly impact our interactions. Also, using the proper terms helps people access the legally mandated support that they need. After all, it's the Americans with Disabilities Act, not the Americans with Special Needs Act. Disabled people do not exist to inspire you. Our society has low expectations of people with disabilities. I know because someone once stopped to tell me that I was an inspiration while I was grocery shopping. I think it's also part of the reason why the unemployment rate for the disability community is double that of our non-disabled peers. I encourage you to set your expectations higher. I also hope you'll watch the amazing TED Talk by Stella Young called "I'm Not Your Inspiration, Thank You Very Much," where she explores this idea more. Representation matters. I'm a theater kid. In theater, I've experienced everything from large roles to directors who told me not to audition because they wouldn't be able to accommodate me. Then I heard about Ali Stroker, the first actor to appear on Broadway in a wheelchair. I was lucky enough to see Ali on stage not once, but twice. That changed everything. Nothing about us without us. If you are telling a story about the disability community, you must include disabled people in that process. Right now, less than 5% of disabled characters in film and TV are played by disabled actors. We deserve storytelling that is authentic, not based on a stereotype. Also, if you truly want to help the disability community, ask us. We are the best authority on our experience and what we need. Now, I'd like to flip it back to you and give you a chance to reflect on some of the things that we've discussed. So I have a couple of action items for you. First, I want you to think about a step that you can take to be more inclusive at home or at work. Then, I want you to think about an area of your life where you want help. Maybe it's going on more dates or cleaning your apartment. If you're feeling brave, and I hope you are, I hope that you will drop your ideas in the chat. I bet that there's someone else in the Zoom room that can help you or help make a connection for you. So 2 action items, a step you can take to be more inclusive at home or at work, and 2, identifying an area of your life where you would like some help. And feel free to drop either of those or both of those in the chat if this community can be of support to you. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. May you find the courage to ask for what you need and the grace to give others what they need. May we work together to design a world where we can all thrive. I'm not afraid of anything, be it mountains, water, dragons, dark, or sky. I'm not afraid of anything. Tell me where's the challenge if you never try. So watch me fly. I'm not afraid. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you so much again. That was really moving and
You're
wonderful.
welcome.
I wasn't prepared for your voice.
Oh, thank you.
Can you talk about best practices for language and use in terms to avoid or to seek toward as we're talking about disabilities?
Yeah, so, gosh, I feel like that could be a whole other speech in of itself. But I think, there tends to be a lot of negative connotations still around disability, and people, you use it in ways that I think people don't even make the connection that they are also referring to an actual disabled person. So like when you say, oh, this person turns a blind eye to something, like turning a blind eye means that you're willfully ignoring. It doesn't mean that you physically can't see it, or it's falling on deaf ears. The deaf community can understand you if you're using sign language. Falling on deaf ears just means that they're willfully not understanding. So that's something that I have to point out to a lot of people. So I think just, that sensitivity of, if you're talking about disability, what sort of light are you using it in? It's not great to say that somebody suffers from a disability because suffering is subjective. Sometimes I'm in pain, but not all the time. yeah, so I think looking at it and, making sure that you're not shining a negative connotation on disability simply by the way that you're describing it is really key. And you see that in the mental health community as well. People say, oh, I'm so OCD, when it's, the fact that you like your dresser drawers arranged a certain way is not the same as obsessive compulsive disorder, which can be a really debilitating disease. So I think just keeping that in mind and making sure that the words that you're using are representing disability well and not kind of projecting that negative experience on it, because it's not always a negative experience.
Thank you. Are there any indie organizations that are doing a good job of making their locations and events accessible that you can think of?
Oh, that's a great
maybe we
question.
Can look toward?
Yeah, well, I think, as I talked about virtual events, I think that's something really important to keep in mind. I mean, I started coming to Creative Mornings when it was virtual, not because I anticipated the space to be inaccessible, but just because it's easier for me. And I think, as much as we like gathering in person and hope to get back to that more, I think there's a huge opportunity there to continue to offer virtual options when done well that can reach audiences. I mean, like you mentioned, we've got people from all over the country this morning who didn't have to drive, didn't have to, book a hotel room. So I think that's really going to be the key for a lot of organizations moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. That makes me think a little bit about, in your presentation, some of the changes in the physical environment that have been catalyzed by the disability community or the disabled community, and some of the virtual things hopefully we can carry forward to make sure.
Yeah.
We have a Broadway question here.
Oh, excellent.
As a Broadway fan and performer,
Yeah.
What are your favorite shows, and what are you looking forward to coming up?
Oh my God, I love this question. Can whoever asked that, let's be friends in real life. So Broadway, so favorite shows. The first musical I fell in love with was Rent in high school. That soundtrack was like my heartbeat when I was a sophomore in high school. And then the musical I most want to be in is Songs for a New World, which is the song I'm Not Afraid of Anything comes from. And then, oh gosh, there are so many. What am I looking forward to? I think, continued disability representation. So the first time that I saw Ali Stroker on stage, she was in a revival of a show called Spring Awakening. And the other unique thing about that show was that half of the cast was deaf. And it was this really incredible mix of sign language and spoken word and, captions. And then she was in a revival of Oklahoma, and she played a lead role, and there was no mention of disability or the fact that she was disabled. It was just, she was playing Ado Annie, and Ado Annie happened to be disabled. And I even have friends with kids who saw her perform and said, oh, that character isn't always in a wheelchair. So, it's this interesting shift where for a long time people thought, oh, how can we do that? How can we make theater accessible? How can we make the stage accessible? And now people like Ali are paving that path, and I am really hopeful to see just more disabled people on stage playing all kinds of characters.
You've done some work with children over the years, professionally and in your volunteer work. Mm-hmm. What do children understand that maybe adults don't about inclusivity?
Well, what I love about the musical theater question is, one thing I stress to kids is that a disability is just part of who a person is. And so when you meet someone with a disability, you can ask them about different things. So especially when I'm talking to little kids, I get a lot of questions about, what's your favorite number and what's your favorite ice cream flavor? And I think, the earlier that kids get exposed to disability, the more it's just another thing that exists in the world that they navigate with. It's not a huge issue. It's not something that they're worried about. It's just something that is, and they kind of can figure it out. And I think that's really beautiful, and I hope that more adults can adopt that attitude as well.
Awesome. All right, last question here. You talked a lot about asking for help, but you yourself are also a leader and an ally. How do you balance those roles of both, being a leader in a community and also someone who needs support? How's that complicate your sense of identity?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the thing that comes to mind is that idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. So if I am going to stand up here and say, hey, it's important to ask for help, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to need support, I can't preach that and not ask for it myself. So I think it's that balance, and just, paying it forward. As I get support, then I learn how to mentor people who are younger than me, our campers with disabilities who need support navigating how to be a teenager with a disability. So I think it's that give and take, and understanding that, others have things to offer me, and I have things to offer them, and it's important to protect that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I know y'all have a lot of stuff to do this morning, so big thanks to Olivia and all of our guests this morning. You're greatly appreciated, and we're so thankful you shared with us. Thanks to everyone out there for rocking with us on Zoom this morning. We're going to leave the chat open for a little while as we sign up. As always, thank you for showing up today. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for taking care of yourselves and working toward that in the future. I look forward to seeing all your beautiful faces next month. Have a great day.